India is the country with most Instagram active users, and I'm sure that you are spending hours and hours scrolling reels on Instagram on a daily basis. But do you know how Instagram is affecting your decision making? In this episode, I'm in conversation with Dharmesh, and we talk about what factors affect our decisions on a daily basis. Before we begin, press subscribe and like the video because we release a new podcast episode every Tuesday and Friday at 5 p.m. IST. Alright, let's begin in 3, 2, 1. So, Dharmesh, I was reading about your newsletter about how do Indians invest their money. That was a
Mhm.
very interesting topic to me. I felt it was very interesting. So, can you sort of deep dive into how you went about it?
So, finance is a topic that I've always been very excited about. And I've worked with a lot of fintechs before. So, I started my journey with this lending company called Rupeek. And post that, I worked with this fintech company called ClearTax, where I was working on the tax compliance software. And later, I most recently I worked working with this fintech company called Setu, where we were building APIs that were connecting financial institutions and the fintechs, right? So the entire domain of fintech is very exciting, especially from a very behavioral lens, which is around why aren't most people investing in stock market, or why is there a hesitance towards mutual fund, and why are most people preferring fixed deposits and gold is a question that's always at the back of my mind. I'm always trying to look for reports that are helping me form better opinions around these hypotheses, right? So one of the most exciting report around this topic is the RBI household report, which was published in 2017, which is like a thorough analysis around the different financial assets and how people sort of perceive them and what is the kind of adoption of these assets across India. Even though right now the report is around like 6 years old, but I think it's a gold mine for anybody who's trying to understand fintech. Now, what I did is that report is like my go to understand consumer behavior, especially in terms of financial asset adoption. I try keep reading this report now and then, but I try to combine some data points from that report in addition to the observations that I've done during my user interviews. So I brought a mix of these two and I made that particular newsletter. So that's one thing. So, for example, uh, things around predictability, right? So Indians largely have a very savings sort of a mindset, right? Because we are a economy which is not much developed, so there is not much left to save, and we don't know when there is an event of liquidity that might happen. So an event of liquidity could be anything. In case of, let's say, in a household of four people, what if one person sort of falls ill? What if there is a medical emergency, correct? Now during these distress times, ideally in a very financially well planned household, there should be health insurance which should sort of help them in covering it. But the health insurance adoption is so low that they'll have to sort of have cash ready made in their hand to address this health crisis that might arise, which is completely unexpected, correct? So in those times, what are the stuff that usually helps people is either they have it in the form of cash or gold, which can be pledged, or they borrow it from money lenders because they are the ones who are ready to give money in a quick turnaround time but with a higher sort of interest rate, right? So because of such behavior and cases, most people try to preserve or save their money in something that's liquid, easily accessible. And that was a hypothesis that I had. And when this report also talks about saying that, how gold is very widely sort of loved by Indians as a savings instrument, it also makes sense, right? So anytime I write a newsletter, it's a combination of quantitative data that is pulled up from some reliable reports in combination with my observed patterns from the field or user interviews.
So, how do you observe? Like, you conduct surveys, or in your daily life, you keep on observing some behaviors of different people you meet?
Yeah, so I'm primarily a user researcher. As a user researcher, my methodologies are largely qualitative in nature. So when I say qualitative, what it means is the way I sort of gather data is not through crunching Excel sheets or through doing some data analysis, but how I gather data is through conversations and observations, right? So, for example, my methodologies can largely be divided into two. One is where I have a free flowing conversation around a certain topic with the user. So, for example, if I have to understand payments behavior of tier 2 women, I will either I will get their contact, or I will try to recruit them, or I might visit the field. I'll speak to some people. I would have some questionnaires prepared. It's more or like the podcast, how you sort of conduct. So that's something similar. We try and adopt just the execution piece of it. We will have some questionnaire, but we don't necessarily ask like a sort of we won't go question one to question two. We don't do that. We have certain directions, but we sort of conduct those interviews. We gather the data and come back and do analysis, right? On the other hand, if you're trying to sort of already have a prototype, or you have an app that you would want to evaluate, we put those app in front of the users and we try to observe their behavior. We see which of these places where people find it exciting, which of these places where they're struggling hard. So those are the usability challenges that we sort of uncover. They come back with those data points, which is usually a video recording, which is later transcribed, and then we try to find patterns out of it. Correct. So, in a quantitative manner, you might pull out data in Excel sheet, crunch the numbers, and then you sort of represent them in sort of charts and bar graphs, etc. So, in qualitative data, we go either do observation or sort of record interviews, come back with the transcripts, and the transcripts is further diced and sliced, and we derive insights out of it. And there are multiple representations of qualitative data. It could be a customer journey map, or it could be what the most famously called as personas. So it could be one of those that can help people or the most important stakeholder understand how the consumer is interacting with the product or service.
So basically, you have the freedom of approach.
Not necessarily. So there is a framework for which when to pick what methodology. There is definitely some might work and some might not sort of work. So for example, if you're trying to figure out which is the cohort that you need to sort of go behind for a particular product or service, I don't think interviews are very effective, because usually when I'm doing an interview exercise, like a user interview exercise, we are picking anywhere between, let's say, 10 to 15 or 15 to 20 participants. We don't do it with 100 or 200 participants. But if you want to do a market research, sort of market segmentation sort of an exercise, it's better for you to go with something like a survey, because that will give you the numbers, like a large number that you might actually need to understand the behavior at a 10,000 feet view. After you figure out the segmentation, then if you want to further dive deep into a specific hypothesis, then user interviews are far better.
Can you share some example where your research has been helpful to a startup? Like, let's say you said about COD versus, paying beforehand. So how does
Mhm.
that help a startup per se?
So research will not necessarily give you a direction to what to build, right? Let me give you an
Yeah.
example. Let's say a rural woman in a tier 2 city is preferring something in, let's say, in COD. Okay, cash on delivery is her default mode of
Hmm.
payment, and her average ticket size, let's say, is less than 300 rupees. Okay, so this is a quantitative insight that a particular e-commerce app might have, right? Now if you want to
Right.
understand why do they prefer only cash on delivery, and why are they not preferring, like, say, debit card or a credit card and all of it, you need to sort of visit them. Either you can do it through phone call, or you can go on the field and try and understand them, right? Now if you look at it, there might be some of the themes that might emerge. Is that one, they might not necessarily have a bank account of their own, or even if they have a bank account of their own, there might not be debit card or credit card actually linked with it, right? So
Okay.
that's one thing. They might not necessarily have access to the other instruments. Second is when a woman is actually taking a shot at buying an online product for the first time, it's not just uh, she is taking a leap of faith, but it's also about how the entire family perceives her new behavior of buying something from online, right? So let's say she
Right.
might not necessarily buy something very expensive. So what if she buys something expensive and if it turns out bad? One, she loses out money or she loses out faith, but she also is under the scrutiny of the neighbors and the family people who
Hmm.
might say that, you are not capable enough to take smart decisions, right? That is also in the social realm, which is all at the back of their mind when they're making decisions. Correct. Now, this is a insight which can be presented. Now, how are you going to sort of solve it is up to the stakeholders. Research is not a tool for you to tell you what to do. That is where product
Right.
managers, founders, designers, analysts, marketing people are there, right? So what can it can give you is a consumer side view or view point of why certain things are happening. Of course, researchers can orchestrate, can give you directions, but you are not bound by taking that in the face value and doing it all the time. Right? Because I am coming from my own biases. I might know I might be limited by the data that I have. Correct. So
Right.
a business person will, so it has to have a balance of what you take this insight and how you sort of want to build it is up to the consumers. Definitely, researchers can orchestrate in the problem solving phase by giving them continuous nudges around how people might think. But I strongly believe it is not the responsibility of the researcher to give exact solution. And most of the time, it's not well received because they're coming. So, for example, if I say that cash on delivery should be the default option because most people prefer it, and that's not a viable business model, right? Cash on delivery option comes with its
Hmm.
own
Right.
set of charges, correct? So it has to be a balance. So it has to be a collaborative effort. The solutioning part should be a collaborative effort.
Yeah. Got it. So, what are some of the most interesting topics that you have conducted your research on?
So the topics is largely so I recently completed one study around how urban households try and understand food, right? In a so for example, earlier when I grew up, it was largely home cooked food, right? It was
Hmm.
99 percentage of the time home cooked food. When going to a restaurant was like a quote unquote festival by itself or a celebration by itself, like only when your dad was in the mood or when like the relatives come and they want to feel sort of celebrated or feel fancy, they might actually go to a restaurant. Like food ordering was never like online deliveries did not necessarily exist. But cut to almost 2 decades later, today going to a restaurant ordering food online, so there are multitudes of options that has come to sort of consume food, and it is also aided because of multiple factors, primarily because earlier it was slightly more patriarchal setup where the women take care of the kitchen and the men went and sort of quote unquote earn money, so everybody had their sort of responsibility. Now those responsibilities sort of merge now in a home where there are a couple who's both of them are working. The the the, the dynamics around the food has completely sort of changed, correct? Now this study where I was trying to understand how has the food behavior changed over a period of time, especially in the urban households where the choice of what to eat has actually expanded multifold. So that's one study that I recently conducted. That's a story that we keep publishing in India Notes. But in D91 Labs, we did conduct a lot of studies around the financial behavior of people, which largely covered around what is their income, how much do they spend, where do they spend, how much do they save, what are the instruments that they prefer, and what is their view on insurance, and how do they look at loans. So it's a snapshot of their financial behavior. That's something we document. It's a slightly, I would say, like a 10,000 feet view sort of study. Where we tried understanding their perception or their behavior around these different financial instruments.
Awesome. Can we dive deeper into your food research and can you share some insights which you gained and you felt that that was a very interesting insight which you had not predicted?
Yeah, so I think social media plays a huge role in people exploring sort of food, right? Now, for example, one of the participants actually told me that his wife's consumption of reels, which encompasses a lot of the show's clips around the Korean food vloggers or Japanese food vloggers or some of the shows that are being shown in Netflix, like a chef's table, has actually influenced the couple to go and explore new Vietnamese restaurant or Korean restaurant or a Japanese restaurant in the city. So his hypothesis or his explanation was that, you know what, this is an experience that I'm visually sort of thinking, like consuming through Instagram reels or YouTube shorts. Now the closest for me to sort of get a piece of what I see visually is to go and eat that food. Of course, I can't afford to
Mm.
go to Japan or Korea and consume that food. For me, the sort of proxy to get closer to what I'm experiencing visually is to actually go to a Japanese restaurant, right? Now, this tied up with what I'm seeing, what I'm observing in Bangalore, especially, right? You have these specialty restaurants where now there are Vietnamese cuisine, Burmese cuisine, Japanese cuisine, or even sushi, for example. There are earlier probably you would have seen one or two restaurants you'll have to travel like 10, 20 kilometers to go to that. Now you get have access to all of them either on Swiggy, or there are different chains of them opening up in all the different areas, right? Which also is an indicator to show that more people are open to try out more cuisines, and social media plays a huge sort of role in it, right? That was something uh, I think was quite a surprise, because I'm not a big consumer of Instagram reels as such. I'm most of the time I spend on Twitter, but I never knew the implications of in the real life based on what they see on social media, right? And there are some more other interesting themes that came up in social media. Also, the fact that where a lot of people now move away from this concept of trusting a restaurant based on ratings to how the influencers are sort of recommending it, correct? So any informed user, when I say informed user, is someone who's worked in tech or who has been using Swiggy or Zomato over a longer period of time, kind of can understand that it is not a trustworthy thing to take reviews in the face value, right? One, it can be
Mm.
rigged, and some people believe that, what is there is no common norm of saying that, okay, 4.5 is best or 4.1 is best or 3.5 is best. And I don't know what does 3.5 even mean, right? Because they've had experiences of where they would have eaten at a 3.5 rating restaurant and they would have still felt the food is good, or they might have eaten at a
Right.
4.5 rating restaurant and still felt that, okay, this is not worth a 4.5 rating. Now, how do we go still deeper into it is where again the Instagram reels come into picture, or like the food influencers come into picture, where them somewhere transporting you to that particular environment and showing, for example, how this vada pav is made, or how this dosa is made, or how this bhajia is made. Somewhere at that point in time, you are completely not thinking about the ratings at all, right? So some of the
Mm.
smaller
Makes
places which
sense.
become a hit, they're not becoming a hit because they were rated 4.5 on Google or Zomato, right? Sometimes they might not even have a presence in any of these platforms, and yet all of a sudden, after a food influencer visits, the crowd to that place shoots up because everybody wants to capture the visual experience that they saw on Instagram, correct? Now the idea of how I perceive good food has moved from just numbers to making it more narrative based is also something that was very interesting. I'll give you an example, correct?
Mm.
If you're buying a grocery is an experience for a family, correct? Now, yet you see
Yep.
that, most of the grocery apps are still individual accounts. There is no way for me to sort of tie two accounts together and say that, this is my mom's account, this is my dad's account, and stuff like that. Correct.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to a shopping, the person who purchases might be every member of the family, but the person who actually pays for it might be the dad in many cases, right?
Yep.
I'm not even getting into this concept. So a lot of people might get pissed off because saying, "Oh, I'm supporting patriarchy and stuff like that." I am purely talking about the observation that I had. Right? This is nothing
Yep.
for my personal stance. But if the dad is sort of paying, so which means the purchase flow and the checkout flow is decoupled in a real life situation, correct?
Right.
And yet it is closely tied up in an online app, correct? So any decision that you take, you will see there is a heavy influence around the people that the individual sort of lives with. Now, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be the sort of neighborhood that they live in. It has multiple factors to it, right? Sometimes you will sort of see irrational decisions people make. It might sound very irrational for us, but it's completely rational for them, in the name of, let's say, God, correct? So because they strongly believe in God and they believe in the belief system and all of it, they might not
Yeah.
so probably they might actually spend money on something spiritual, believing that that is going to give them hope, right? Now, I can't go and so on fight back and say that the 100 rupees that you're spending should be in mutual fund. It doesn't make sense. Right. And where do
Yep.
they get this
Got it.
belief from? These beliefs are not built from a very individual experience. It is built from a collective experience.
Right.
Somebody has told me that somebody has told them that they are from a certain religion. Somebody has told them in Tamil they call it like the Kuladevam, which is essentially your family god. And somebody has told them that this
Okay.
god has probably helped from generations to generation, so you should also go and sort of pray to it. Right. So my I have another problem is that we sort of um, refuse to believe, or we sort of ignore a lot of these in terms of saying that these are non-scientific beliefs, and when we are building products, right? Which I think I have a slighter problem with it.
Got it. Do you feel that the younger generation is taking more towards the West?
We will always be inspired by some amount of West, but I think it'll all merge at some point and create something culturally new, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at it,
Interesting.
you will see that a lot of even US influencers are now trying to sort of impress Indian audience, because it gives them like a huge viewership, correct? You will see someone like someone who is always dancing there is now all of a sudden dancing for a Punjabi song or a Tamil song or like a Telugu song, all of it, because now they know that okay, so now there'll be more people who will be interested in watching my sort of content. That becomes a wedge for them to sort of break into like a new cohort or segments. Or even someone like Mr. Beast is investing money in dubbing all of his videos in Hindi, because he knows that there's a
Yeah.
huge audience to it. Now then, this begs the question of saying that is the India inspired by West, or is it West getting inspired by India? Right now, today, Spielberg and what is this? James Cameron is watching RRR, and he's like, I'm in awe of it, right?
Hmm.
Whereas people in India might be like, oh, might look at movies that we make in India and say that, oh, these are masala movies, or they are mindless movies and stuff like that, right? I think it's merging at some level. We might evolve into something new. I wouldn't really call it saying, oh, West is getting inspired by India or India is inspiring the West. I think
Yeah.
it will all merge into something new, is how I look at it.
Also, I was reading about your study about the Friend app, which was like the Tinder for Bharat. It was
Mhm.
also very interesting to read how you had conducted your report and how you had expressed your thoughts. So, what was that process like? How was your study for that particular research?
One is, the app by itself needs to be something unique for me to get its attention, right? So you would see a lot of these apps which are probably uh, adopted version of something that already exists, right? Let's say, for example, if you're building a food tech app for tier 2 cities in India, and if your interface and largely the language and the sort of what do you say, the copy that you use is largely inspired by Swiggy, then I don't find anything novel in your app, correct?
Yeah.
Maybe you have like a differentiation model in terms of the restaurants that you curate, the pricing and stuff like that, but purely from the design aspect of it, I don't find it much exciting, right? But what I really sort of found with Friend was that the equivalent of it, like how I said, it's a Tinder for Bharat. It is nothing close to how Tinder looks or works. Correct.
Okay.
It does a very bottoms up approach, with this idea of saying that, hey, in India, nobody is really asking you, can we go on a date? And but the common norm is that, can we do friendship, right? Now it builds from that idea of saying, can we do friendship? How do I convert this into sort of an app? Now, when I started using the app, which is essentially try to understand the onboarding or how some of the smaller nuances were taken care in the design of it, I was mind blown. To give you a simple example, there is a screen so there is a terms and condition which you sort of accept, which is by default. Then there is an explicit screen with a, a polishish looking logo, which says that, that the person is promising that he or she is going to behave himself or herself within the app. And if they break some rule of conduct, and they sort of give permission for the app to report them to the police, right? Now I don't know how much is it the screen is abided by law and stuff, like, I hopefully mostly it won't be, but the fact that they introduced such a screen, I've never seen this in any app, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure if you built something like this, it has come from a lot of either consumer observation or their behavior and all of it. It at least gives them an insight of saying that, okay, this person is going to be little more better behaved inside the app if the screen did not exist, right?
Hmm.
Now, a lot of such interesting nuances in the app was what caught my attention, and that's why I thought I will sort of do a deep dive into that particular app.
Yeah. Do you feel that if startups or businesses are built after getting the user research, they have a much more chance of succeeding?
No, no. So user research will not sort of promise you any success, right? User research will help you avoid making some big mistakes. That's all. It might
Okay.
sort of improve your chances of success. And for you to succeed, there might be multiple factors. There might be a huge factor is luck and how you execute and all of it. Like I also said that, you and me can have the same insight, but what you do with it depends on what kind of people we are, right? So I keep thinking
Yes.
about this one anecdotal story that I read long back, right? So this is probably maybe like few decades or like a century back or something. So that's how the story goes, where there are two reporters are trying to cover a taking of a ship from the port, because it's a huge ship and it's a huge event and everybody standing there at the port. So there is a new reporter. This is the first sort of reporting that he's going to do. So he goes there, and then there is another reporter also has gone there. And for some strange reason, that day the ship is not taking off, and the entire event is cancelled. The new reporter comes back very sad, and he says that, you know what, the ship didn't take off. I think it's just really a bad day, right? But the other reporter comes back to the editor and says that, I have a breaking news. The ship that was supposed to sort of take off from the port did not take off, and this is something we should cover. It's the same data,
Hmm.
but how you perceive
Interesting.
it and how you sort of put it to your use differs, correct? And this is a very simple story, but every time when I think about research, this keeps coming back to my mind. We both can have the same insight, but what you do with it will will sort of be different.
What did you mean, like when you said luck just a couple minutes back? What you meant by that?
Luck is essentially we can actually increase our odds of success, but there'll be multiple factors for you to become successful. I'll give you an example. Again, this is something that I keep thinking about it. Let's say in 2016, I go and I do a consumer study about the chances of digital payments taking off. That's the time UPI is still at a very, very early stage. Not many people have heard
Hmm.
about
Yeah.
it. There is a company called PhonePe, which is still coming up. But Paytm is like the market leader, and they have actually launched their wallets, which where you can transfer money from one person to the other person, and all of it. And they're also launching sort of QR codes. Very few shops are having, like, even in Bangalore, like 1 in 100 shops might have it. In Koramangala, maybe you will see a little more common than in the rest of the places. Now, let's say I go back and do a research, and whatever, I time travel and I do a research, trying and understanding, will digital payments work, and if they work, when will they work, right? Let's say I do a research, And most likely my finding might be that is that even if people have bank accounts, they are not feeling very comfortable about connecting their bank accounts to something online. That might be one observation. And second is, for this to happen, I would have probably assumed it's going to take another decade. But it took probably less than 5 years for us to completely transform the digital payment space. But what was the important factor in that is demonetization, right? Nobody would have actually predicted demonetization, not even a day before, right? Forget like a month before or a year before. Nobody would have predicted even like a day before. That, even though it was challenging for many people, it sort of changed the narrative around digital payments at some level. Correct. A similar thing you can apply it for even COVID. Yes, COVID was a very dark event. Unfortunately, we had to lose many lives in it. At the same time, it also forced a lot of people to try digital payments and the digital purchases for the first time, right? You had no way to actually go and pay the Bescom bill by traveling to the sort of whatever, like the Bescom office. You're forced to sort of figure out, how do I pay my electricity bill? Then somebody is telling you that no, there is an app called Google Pay, Phone Pay. You can download, you can link your bank account, you can pay. And the first time somebody pays it, it might blow their mind to say that, oh damn, this is actually saving half a day's effort for me, and then I want to go back.
Yeah.
Right? Till today, it is very difficult for me to individually go and stop everyone to convince what every individual's mind to saying that, hey, this is a better way. But when there is a black swan event that happens, then everybody is in the sort of, because they're left with no choice, they tend to put in a different lens and shoe and look at the world in a slightly more different manner, right? Now, nobody can predict these black swan events. And if you are at the right time, at the right place, then you are lucky.